Well, welcome back to episode 2 of Try Beginner's Luck, Ask a Coach. Yeah. I don't know about you, but the first episode to me was really good. We went back to the basics to find out what triathlon was, then finding out the difference between triathlon versus multisport, and we learned a little bit more about Coach Maria and Coach Lloyd, and it was just good. But now we have a question. We have some questions that was submitted by Martine F of Lithia, Florida, which is, I think, the Tampa Bay area. And so we're going to bring in our expert resident coaches to try to get these answers, to get these questions answered. Welcome, Coach Lloyd and Coach Maria. How y'all doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good.
Great.
Maria,
Thanks for bringing us back.
all right. You guys are resident. You're always here. Now, one thing we might do is we might bring in some pop-up guest coaches because, right, there's so many coaches and we want to give people opportunities to hear different vantage points, but you guys are it. You are the resident Ask a Coach coaches. You're the head coaches team. Does that make sense? No.
That works.
And it's also beautiful because they both have their own businesses, right? But yet this shows the power of great coaches who can come together and work together to do something different. And because I asked and they said yes, so I'm grateful. So thank you so much for being willing to be here. So let's get into this because we want to keep this short and sweet. Martine F of Lithia, Florida, the Tampa Bay area, she has some questions. And, this is some good stuff. So the first question that she proposed was, what would you say to encourage someone that's been watching from the sideline and wants to start training for a triathlon? I think we kind of hit that in the first episode, but in case people didn't get it, what would you guys do to encourage someone to get off the sidelines and start training?
Ooh, that's a good one. Well, it'd probably be asking what's holding you back. What is it that makes you, that you find exciting when you go and you look and you're like, oh, I'm thinking about it. And what exactly is it that you are, keeping you from actually signing up? After that, my next statement is you should just go ahead and register for a race that fits your work-life schedule, and then we start from there. Once you pick a race, even if you're not going to be ready when you sign up, that's okay. But find an event within your wheelhouse and your potential capabilities and the time frame, and then sign up for it, and then start troubleshooting on how do you get ready for that event.
Yeah, and I think to cut down on some of the intimidation that comes with learning a new sport, if you can find others in your area, like going to the USA Triathlon site and looking for a club that's near you. There's a lot of clubs that are registered through USA Triathlon, and there's some that aren't, and you don't have to have a USAT club, but it's probably an easier way to find a club, to find a group of like-minded individuals that can help you. And if there is no club near you, so if you live somewhere that's more rural and there's not a lot of people, enlist a buddy. Get a buddy to commit with you, because that may help with some of the intimidation factor. That being said, I'm with Lloyd. I think find a race and register. Now you've got the impetus to get started, and so I think that's a great piece of advice that he's offered.
Find that race, register, and let's get started. Yes. Now, we found the race. The next question she asked was, how many times a week is ideal for a beginner to train for a triathlon? These questions are stumping y'all. I see it because you're like, wait a minute, I have to go back and think to this beginning set mindset. So I'm here for all these looks. Yes, and yes.
Yeah. Okay. So my look is really, so I guess I want to this may not be helpful to people listening necessarily, but it may be helpful as well. I mean, it may be both helpful and not helpful at the same time. I really see each athlete as N of one, right? An individual with different characteristics, different sets of experience. So I don't think that there's a single answer to the question of how many times per week do I need to train. That being said, when you're training for a triathlon, you, especially your first time, you will find that you need to do something 5 to 6 days a week. It doesn't always mean that it's long. It doesn't always mean that it's intense. I think that's another misperception that beginners have, that like every day is hard and long and intense, and it's not. Most of my job as a coach often is pulling people back, not pushing them to go harder or longer. So I don't have a set answer to that, because I am concerned that people will hear you need to train X times a week, and then they go out and they do that. So I think it needs to be reflective of who each athlete is as a person, what their schedule's like, what their previous athletic experience is, if any, and kind of going from there. But that being said, you should assume you'll do something 5 to 6 times a week as a beginner.
I completely agree. Everyone is unique. So there's not a cookie cutter answer for everyone. You have different strengths, different weaknesses that you need to keep in mind. But yeah, you're basically moving into a physically active lifestyle.
Martine, I hope you got your answers and what you needed for that. Next question is explain the different types of triathlons. So I guess you guys can just ping pong back and forth with the different types of triathlons. And if I'm counting correctly, there might be 5-ish different types. 6. See, I'm wrong. Great. This is why we're here to learn. Let's talk
Well, I
about
guess
those
it depends
6.
on how you count them. It's going to depend on how you count them.
Okay, that's why we're here. Let's go. Number 1, what do we have?
Do
Well,
you want to go by like
if
super
we're trying to
sprint?
go for 6, I guess you would go with your super sprint is how we're going to start the first one.
Yeah, let's start with a super sprint. What is a super sprint?
The super sprints are probably the shortest distance that you're going to get. You're thinking of something in the neighborhood of maybe 50 meters to maybe 200 or 300 meters swim. The bike ride is going to be maybe 3 to 8 miles or so, and then the run is going to be maybe about a mile or so, mile or two. So just enough for you to kind of get in there, see if you like it, get your feet wet. And if you're competitive, it's a chance for you to just go as hard and as fast as you possibly can, with trying to prevent the wheels from coming off the bus.
Okay, Maria, second
And
one.
then next up, we would have the sprint distance, which is still considered short course racing, but the distances that Lloyd mentioned on the super sprint, they're going to go a little bit higher. So you might see something between 400 to 750 meters. You might see rides that are between 10 and 16, 18 miles, depending, and so the distances, I guess I should say the distances for like super sprint and sprints are not like set. When we get into some of the long course races, there's a little bit more of a set distance, but not always. But it's not super confusing, but there's kind of like a range here. And then the runs are typically in and around a 5K, although I have seen sprints go up to as much as 4 miles on the run side.
Okay.
Then once you do that, then you start to go into your Olympic distance. That's when we start to get into the more standard numerics of it, where you're going to have a 1,500 meter swim or 1 mile swim, a 25-mile bike ride, and then a 10K run.
Okay, and what's after that, Maria?
You're going to start you're going to start to make the transition there from short course racing to long course racing. The most popular first entry to long course racing would be the 70.3 distance. Although I should say that once you get into that range, there can be variations. But if you're doing, for example, an Ironman branded race, it's going to stick with that standard 70.3 miles, which is broken into a 1.2 mile swim, a 56-mile bike, and a half marathon.
And then for your long course, it's typically whether it is an Ironman branded or non-branded event. For the long course, they're going to be 140.6. So a 2.4-mile swim, a 112-mile bike ride, and then a 26.2 marathon at the end.
So what's the sixth one?
Well, I am adding on to that because I got to give a shout out to my ultra course peeps. There are races that go beyond the 140.6 distance, and they include anything from a double 140.6, so 281.2 miles. So that would be a 4.8-mile swim, a 224 bike, and then a double marathon for the double iron distance or double 140.6 distance. But it doesn't stop there.
No.
You've got triple. And then in the United States, these races are typically referred to as anvils. That's what the race directing company calls it. So you could do a double anvil, triple anvil, quintuple anvil, deca, which would be 10. And then in each of these races, you have the choice to do it continuously, which means all of the swim at once, all of the bike at once, all of the run at once. And once the clock starts, it keeps ticking. Or you can do a one-a-day format. So in this case, you would do 140.6 each day. You'd have, the 17 hours to get it done. Then you go to sleep. You wake up the next morning and you do it again. So you have those choices. There's also stage racing at the ultra distance. So many of your listeners may or may not have heard of Ultraman. There's a couple of these: Florida, Canada, Arizona, Hawaii. And these are 3 days of racing with a 10K swim. And I believe it's a 90K bike after that swim. And then you've got on day 2, I believe it's a 180K bike. And I might be a tick off. So Lloyd, please correct me if I'm wrong here. And then you finish on day 3 with a double marathon. So what's different about Ultraman versus the anvils is that each day when you're done those sequences, you go to sleep. And then you wake up and you start again. So if you are bit by the long course bug, and you want to go super long, you can do that. So yeah, I would put it in its own category because I do think the logistics, especially when you get super long in stage racing, is kind of different.
Well, God bless.
Now I stumped you, Mashonda.
Listen, it was when you said like the stage racing and the multi-day 10. For those who can imagine it, I am grateful for those who are out there trying. I think now I want to know who's done it because now I want to interview them. I want to interview people who've done.
Oh, I got people for you.
Okay, perfect. Because that has just blown. I was like, what? So look, you can do anything from a super sprint all the way to a staged anvil multi-day triathlon race. Wow. I am overwhelmed by the amount of endless possibilities that one can do once they choose this sport as a lifestyle. So with that, the last question that we have for today's segment is, what kind of training is required for each of those distances? Like, can you give us a brief, like we got glasses coming off, we got laughs, like, whoa, like, what does this look like? Because again, people, you've exposed us to it. Now we got to know, what do we need to do to train for it? And it can be very general because once you get into the heavier distances, you already know, like, your mindset has to be in a certain place. Like, you have to know that you're going to be sleep deprived, or when you get into long course training, it's like having a part-time job, making sure you have the time requirements. So let's just start from the beginning again. What kind of training is required for each distance? Super sprint, let's go.
So I'm going to put it out the same way Maria put it out to start off. This is so nuanced and varies, and what one athlete can do um, to prepare for an event may be too much for one person or not enough for someone else. So, we've got to put those kind of caveats on the discussion to make sure, someone doesn't get, hear a number, decide that that's their number and realize it was too much and I got hurt or not enough. And now I'm not prepared for my event. Okay. So just want to kind of make sure we clear that up starting. So, make sure you check with your resident professional, your club, to figure out exactly what you need based on your lifestyle, your fitness, your capabilities, and all of those other things. Now we can try to start to answer that question.
Thank you for the clarification.
Ditto
Right.
on all the caveats. Ditto.
Right. So I would say for for the super sprint and the sprint, again, you're looking at getting into a physically active lifestyle. So you want to think of somewhere probably in the range of, 3 to 5 hours of athletic activity per week. How that's going to get broken out is going to vary, but you're thinking of somewhere between 3 to 5 hours of physical activity in one of the three sports or some other physical activity that can translate into the three sports that you're working on. For the Olympic, you're gonna, because the distances is more than the sprint, you're gonna probably look for a few more hours per week. So I'm thinking probably in the neighborhood of 6 to 8 would kind of get you started. And again, throwing that caveat back out, if you have goals of winning the race, it may be a whole lot more. Right? If you're like, hey, I've got a background in something else, right? But if we're talking about, I'm just trying to get in, I saw the folks at my office talking about it, and what would it be just for me to kind of suit up and participate? That's where I'm having this discussion in, right? So probably about 6 to 8 hours for an Olympic with some nuances. For a half, I think somewhere between 8 to 12 hours a week is what you're gaming. Some weeks are going to be more, some weeks may be less. When you get into the full distance, on the low side of the discussion, you're looking at 12 to 18 as a broad stroke kind of wrap your mind around this number, but it's going to vary significantly. When you get into those decas, you know what? I'm gonna bow out. I have no athletes doing decas. So if they call me, I'm probably sending them to Maria. Like, you know what? Let her counsel you on this, because this is probably a bad idea all around if you haven't built your way up to this point in several years of work.
Yes, I strongly recommend, even for 70.3 and 140.6, I strongly recommend building your way into those distances. I can certainly appreciate the excitement of wanting to do a long course race, but I think sometimes when athletes jump right into that 140.6, it is not impossible for a 140.6 to be your first triathlon. It is not impossible. We have coached people to do it. I know Lloyd has coached people to do it. It's just not advisable, because I always tell athletes, what kind of day do you want to have? What sort of day do you want to have? Do you want to suffer and be miserable, or do you want to have fun and smile? And I think that, your progression into these races is important. The other thing I'd like to say on that score before I talk a little bit more about training, please never say, I'm just doing a sprint. Never say that. A sprint is a triathlon. It is a full triathlon. So I am very careful not to use the words half distance and full distance, because it communicates that if you're not doing the full distance, which is often equated with the 140.6, you are somehow not doing a full triathlon. That is not true. If you are doing this multi-sport experience of any distance, it is a full triathlon. It's whatever distance it is, but you're doing the sports. In terms of like just talking a little bit about training for like the beyond the 140.6 distance, um, it depends on the length on what you're doing. And week to week for your standard age group athlete, the durations are really not significantly more than a 140.6. It's just how it's organized is different. And then you would do some really big, like peak events. Like, so for example, a 12-hour ride, which sounds amazing. I know. But again, it's really specific to the athlete. So not everyone needs to do a 12-hour ride. Some people do. The one thing I will say in my years of coaching, first of all, I agree with all of the time parameters Lloyd gave. So for beginners, first timers at each distance, that's about the range you'd be looking at. As you advance through, as he mentioned, if you want to be competitive, it's different. There's a different approach to training if you're looking to win the race or win your age group at the national level. But what I will say in my years of coaching, most triathletes do not swim enough. You just don't. And I'm sorry to say that, but you don't. Now, if you're a swimmer, you may not be running enough, you may not be cycling enough. So it does kind of depend on how you come into the sport, but a lot of triathletes do not come with a swim background. And so I find that they're not swimming enough, and they're justifying it by saying, the swim is the shortest portion, I don't really need to be ready. But I would encourage you to shift your mindset to say the swim sets the tone for the rest of your day. And if you come out of that lake or that ocean or that river feeling completely gassed, you have now impacted your bike and your run. So I would encourage you to swim more.
Well, that's a lot to consider.
I know everyone hates me now. Like, we hate Coach Maria. She told us to swim more. I like Lloyd better.
But I agree with you.
Yeah. See,
I,
thank you for
I
backing me
agree.
up.
I agree with you on the swim more. I think you have to, especially when you're starting into the sport. One of the things I always tell my athletes is, you have to get the swim down in the early part of your training, early part of introduction to the sport, because as you start to progress, swimming shouldn't be the number one topic of discussion as you continue to progress through the sport. Because again, like you mentioned, the other factors take up more time, but you can only do that if you spent the time developing that swim skill set so that it doesn't hold you back when now you need to shift focus on the other things. But if you skip some steps, then now you're like, oh, I didn't swim enough to begin with, but now I need to really ride and run, but I skipped out on those fundamentals.
There you have it. I want, Maria, you touched on a very cool point about a sprint is a full triathlon and you are a triathlete once you do that. And I think the reason why we say full and half distance is to perhaps compensate because of because the Ironman brand is known for the half and the full. And we want to have some distinguishing language to wrap around. But you're right. If anyone tells you you're not a triathlete and you've done a sprint, which is a full triathlon, they are wrong. You are a triathlete, period. However, as you grow, there is a growth in mileage that you do. And so perhaps we can start calling it something different, like the sprint, the Olympic, middle distance, and then a complete longer distance or a long distance or a long course. But I guess long course and middle distance, anyway, there's probably language already out there. I just have to learn it. But we'll make sure that we continue to just stress that once you do a sprint, you are a triathlete. As you continue to progress, you've just completed different distances that gives you a more rounded and full triathlon experience.
And I would even add, there's really no need for quote unquote progression. Moving to different distances isn't really a progression. It's just doing something different. But you can spend your whole career at whatever distance you choose that brings you joy. Don't feel the need to say, everyone else is doing, this distance, so I now have to progress to that distance in order to be better. Nope. You can find the distance that you like and spend your entire athletic career at that one distance and just really, really become good at it.
Agreed, 100%.
And with that, that's it for episode 2. We did it. There's no need to have long, drawn out sessions when we just need you to understand. That to me was just that hit it. You can stay at whatever level you want to that brings you joy. That's it for us. Whenever you try beginner's luck, you always win. And we're adding the new caveat, if you ask the right questions. Welcome to the ending of episode 2 of Try Beginner's Luck, Ask a Coach. We'll see you soon. If you want to go over to any major podcast platform to listen to full episodes of stories of athletes, and please do that on your major favorite listening platform. And if you want to submit a question because you found us on YouTube, the question will be in the description of what the show is about. So be sure to click there, submit your questions, and we'll be sure to get you your answers that you need. Also, like and subscribe. Yeah, that's what I need you to do. Like and subscribe so you don't miss any of these Ask a Coach segments. With that, we're out. Peace. Thank you, Coach Lloyd and Coach Maria. Bye, everybody.